The coconut tree is a member of the family Arecaceae and the only accepted species in the genus Cocos. The term coconut can refer to the entire coconut palm, the seed, or the fruit, which botanically is a drupe, not a nut. The spelling coconut is an archaic form of the word. The term is derived from the 16th century Portuguese and Spanish word coco, meaning head or skull, from the 3 indentations on the coconut shell that resemble facial features. Coconuts are known for their great versatility, as evidenced by many traditional uses ranging from food to cosmetics. They form a regular part of the diets of many people in the tropics and subtropics. Coconuts are distinct from other fruits for the large quantity of water, and when immature, they are known as tender nuts or jelly nuts and may be harvested for their potable coconut water. When mature, they still contain some water and can be used as seed nuts are processed to give oil from the kernel, charcoal from the hard shell, and coir from the fibrous husk. The endosperm is initially in its nuclear phase suspended within the coconut water. As development continues, cellular layers of endosperm deposit along the walls of the coconut, becoming the edible coconut flesh. When dried, the coconut flesh is called copra. The oil and milk derived from it are commonly used in cooking and frying, as well as in soaps and cosmetics. The husks and leaves can be used as material to make a variety of products for furnishing and decorating. The coconut also has cultural and religious significance in certain societies, particularly in India, where it is used in Hindu rituals. Description: plant. Cocos nuciferae is a large palm, growing up to 30 meters tall, with pinnate leaves 4 to 6 meters long, and pinna 60 to 90 centimeters long. Old leaves break away cleanly, leaving the trunk smooth. Coconuts are generally classified into 2 general types, tall and dwarf. On fertile soil, a tall coconut palm tree can yield up to 75 fruits per year, but more often yields less than 30, mainly due to poor cultural practices. Given proper care and growing conditions, coconut palms produce the first fruit in 6 to 10 years, taking 15 to 20 years to reach peak production. Fruit. Botanically, the coconut fruit is a drupe, not a true nut. Like other fruits, it has 3 layers: the exocarp, mesocarp, and endocarp. The exocarp and mesocarp make up the husk of the coconut. Coconuts sold in the shops of non-tropical countries often have had the exocarp removed. The mesocarp is composed of a fiber called coir, which has many traditional and commercial uses. The shell has 3 germination pores or eyes that are clearly visible on its outside surface once the husk is removed. A full-sized coconut weighs about 1.44 kilograms. It takes around 6,000 full-grown coconuts to produce a ton of copra. Roots. Unlike some other plants, the palm tree has neither a taproot nor root hairs, but has a fibrous root system. The coconut palm root system consists of an abundance of thin roots that grow outward from the plant near the surface. Only a few of the roots penetrate deep into the soil for stability. This type of root system is known as fibrous or adventitious, and is a characteristic of grass species. Other types of large trees produce a single downward-growing taproot with a number of feeder roots growing from it. Coconut palms continue to produce roots from the base of the stem throughout their lives. The number of roots produced depends on the age of the tree and the environment, with more than 3,600 roots possible on a tree that is 60 to 70 years old. Roots are usually less than about 3 inches in diameter and uniformly thick from the tree trunk to the root tip. Inflorescence. The palm produces both the female and male flowers on the same inflorescence, thus the palm is monoecious. Other sources use the term polygamomonoecious. The female flower is much larger than the male flower. Flowering occurs continuously. Coconut palms are believed to be largely cross-pollinated, although some dwarf varieties are self-pollinating. Etymology. One of the earliest mentions of the coconut dates back to the 1001 Nights story of Sinbad the Sailor. He is known to have bought and sold coconut during his fifth voyage. Thenga, its Malayalam Tamil name, was used in the detailed description of coconut found in Itinerario by Ludovico di Varthama, published in 1510, and also in the later Hortus Indicus, Malabaricus. Even earlier, it was called Nux indica, a name used by Marco Polo in 1280 while in Sumatra, taken from the Arabs who called it Jaws Hindi. Both names translate to Indian nut. In the earliest description of the coconut palm known, given by Cosmos of Alexandria in his Topographia Christiana written about 545 AD, there is a reference to the argil tree and its drupe. In March of 1521, an extremely detailed description of the coconut was given by Antonio Pigafetta, writing in Italian and using the words coco, coci, as recorded in his journal after the first European crossing of the Pacific Ocean during the Magellan circumnavigation and meeting the inhabitants of what would become known as Guam in the Philippines. He explained how at Guam they eat coconuts, and that the natives there also anoint the body and the hair with coconut and beniseed oil. The journal then details how on the following week Magellan's expedition landed at Suluan, east of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. There they were given gifts by the natives which included 2 coconuts, with indication that more coconuts would be brought later. Pigafetta then goes into great detail on how coconut is used and processed by the Filipino natives. Coconuts of the fruit of the palm tree. Just as we have bread, wine, oil, and milk, so those people get everything from the tree. They get wine in the following manner. They bore a hole into the heart of the said palm at the top called palmato, from which distills liquor which resembles white must. That liquor is sweet but somewhat tart, and in canes as thick as the leg and thicker. They fasten the bamboo to the tree at evening for the morning, and in the morning for the evening. That palm bears a fruit, namely, the coconut, which is as large as the head or thereabouts. Its outside husk is green and thicker than 2 fingers. Certain filaments are found in that husk, whence is made cord for binding together the boats. Under that husk there is a hard shell, much thicker than the shell of the walnut, which they burn and make therefrom a powder that is useful to them. Under that shell there is a white marrowy substance 1 finger in thickness, which they eat fresh with meat and fish as we do bread, and it has a taste resembling the almond. It can be dried and made into bread. There is a clear, sweet water in the middle of that marrowy substance which is very refreshing. When that water stands for a while after having been collected, it congeals and becomes like an apple. When the natives wish to make oil, they take the coconut, and allow the marrowy substance and the water to putrefy. Then they boil it and it becomes oil like butter. When they wish to make vinegar, they allow only the water to putrefy, and then place it in the sun, and a vinegar results like white wine. For the said fruit milk can also be made, as we proved by experience. For we scraped that marrow, then mixed it with its own water, and being passed through a cloth it became like goat's milk. This kind of palm tree is like the palm that bears dates, but not so knotty. And of these trees will sustain a family of 10 persons. But they do not draw the aforesaid wine always from one tree, but take it for a week from one, and slow with the other, for otherwise the trees would dry up, and in this way they last 100 years. It is evident that the name cocoa and coconut came from these 1521 encounters with Pacific Islanders, and not from the other regions where it was found, as no name is similar in any of the languages of India, where the Portuguese first found the fruit, and indeed Barbosa, Barros, and Garcia, in mentioning the Tamil, Malayalam name Tenga, and Canaries Nal, expressly say, "We call these fruits cocos. Our people have given it the name of cocoa, and that which we call coco, and the Malabars Temga." Other stories to explain the origin of the word have been published. The OED states, Portuguese and Spanish authors of the 16th c. agree in identifying the word with Portuguese and Spanish coco, grinning face, grin, grimace, also bugbear, scarecrow, cognate with cocar, to grin, make a grimace, the name being said to refer to the face-like appearance of the base of the shell, with its 3 holes. According to Losada, the name came from Portuguese explorers, the sailors of Vasco da Gama in India, who first brought them to Europe. The coconut shell reminded them of higos, to which in Portuguese folklore called coco. The specific name nucifera is Latin for nut-bearing. Origin, domestication, and dispersal. Origin. The origin of the plant is, after many decades, still the subject of debate. It has generally been accepted that the coconut originated in the Indian-Indonesia region and distributed itself around the world by riding ocean currents. Most of these claims are vigorously disputed. Cook was one of the earliest modern researchers to draw conclusions about the location of origin of Cocos nuciferae based on its current-day, worldwide distribution. He hypothesized that the coconut originated in the Americas, based on his belief that American coconut populations predated European contact, and because he considered pantropical distribution by ocean currents improbable. Thor Heyerdahl later used this as one part of his hypothesis to support his theory that the Pacific Islanders originated as 2 migration streams, for the Canadian Pacific coast to Hawaii, and on to Tahiti and New Zealand in a series of hops, and another migration from South America via sailing balsa wood rafts. However, the conventional scientific opinion supports an Indo-Pacific origin either around Melanesia and Malaysia of the Indian Ocean. The modern coconut has 2 different species, essentially a Pacific version and an Atlantic one. However, all modern coconuts appear to be domesticated plants, rather than the more primitive forms found in fossils in North Australia and Indonesia. The oldest fossils known of the modern coconut, dating from the Eocene period from around 37 to 55 million years ago, were found in Australia and India, but older palm fossils such as some of Nipah fruit have been found in the Americas. A species with strawberry-sized nuts lived in New Zealand in the Miocene since 1978. The work on tracing the probable origin and dispersal of Cocos nucifera has only recently been augmented by publication on the germination rate of the coconut seed nut and another on the importance of the coral atoll ecosystem. Briefly, the coconut originated in the coral atoll ecosystem without human intervention and required a thick husk and slow germination to survive and disperse. Domestication. Coconuts could not reach inland locations without human intervention, and early germination on the palm was important. Rather than increasing the number or size of the edible parts of a fruit that was already large enough, human cultivation of the coconut selected not for larger size but for thinner husks and increased volume of endosperm, the solid meat or liquid water that provides the fruit its food value. Although these modifications for domestication would reduce the fruit's ability to float, this ability would be irrelevant to a cultivated population. Among modern sea nuciferae, two major types of variants occur: a thick-husked, angular fruit and a thin-husked, spherical fruit with a higher proportion of endosperm reflect a trend of cultivation in sea nuciferae. The first coconuts were of the Arecaceae type, with thick husks to protect the seed, and angular, highly ridged shape to promote buoyancy during ocean dispersal, and a pointed base that allowed fruits to dig into the sand, preventing them from being washed away during germination on a new island. As early human communities began to harvest coconuts for eating and planting, they selected for a larger endosperm to husk ratio and a broader, spherical base, which rendered the fruit useful as a cup or bowl, thus creating the EJavanainen type. The decreased buoyancy and increased fragility of this spherical, thin-husked fruit would not matter for a species that had started to be dispersed by humans and grown in plantations. Harry's adoption of the Polynesian terms Arecaceae and EJavanainen has now passed into general scientific discourse, and his hypothesis is generally accepted. Variants of sea nuciferae are also categorized as tall or dwarf. The two groups are genetically distinct, with the dwarf variety showing a greater degree of artificial selection for ornamental traits and for early germination and fruiting. The tall variety is outcrossing while dwarf palms are incrossing, which has led to a much greater degree of genetic diversity within the tall group. The dwarf subgroup is thought to have mutated from the tall group under human selection pressure dispersal. It is often stated that coconuts can travel 110 days or 3,000 miles by sea and still be able to germinate. This figure has been questioned based on the extremely small sample size that forms the basis of the paper that makes this claim. EJavanainen provides an alternative, a much shorter, estimate based on his first-hand experience crossing the Pacific Ocean on the raft Kon-Tiki. The nuts we had in baskets on deck remained edible and capable of germinating the whole way to Polynesia, but we had laid about half among the special provisions below deck with the waves washing around them. Every single one of these was ruined by the sea water. And no coconut can float over the sea faster than a balsa raft moves with the wind behind it. Quote. He also notes that several of the nuts began to germinate by the time they had been 10 weeks at sea, precluding an unassisted journey of 100 days or more. However, the coconut variety Hyde chose for his long sea voyage likely was of the large, fleshy, spherical EJavanainen type, which Harris observed to have a significantly shorter germination type and worse buoyancy than the uncultivated Arecaceae type. Therefore, Hyde's observations cannot be considered conclusive when it comes to determining the independent dispersal ability of the uncultivated coconut. Drift models based on wind and ocean currents have shown that coconuts could not have drifted across the Pacific unaided. If they were naturally distributed and had been in the Pacific for 1,000 years or so, then we would expect the eastern shore of Australia, with its own islands sheltered by the Great Barrier Reef, to have been thick with coconut palms. The currents were directly into and down along this coast. However, both James Cook and William Bligh found no sign of the nuts along this 2,000 kilometers stretch when he needed water for his crew, nor were the coconuts on the east side of the African coast until Vasco da Gama, nor in the Caribbean when first visited by Christopher Columbus. We know from early Spanish documents that they deliberately planted coconuts shortly after first contact, and some nuts would certainly have self-seeded when they floated ashore following shipwrecks. They were commonly carried by Spanish ships as a source of sweet water. This provides substantial circumstantial evidence that deliberate voyagers were involved in carrying coconuts across the Pacific Ocean and that they could not have dispersed worldwide without human agency. More recently, genomic analysis of cultivated coconut has shed light on the movement. By examining 10 microsatellite loci, researchers found 2 genetically distinct subpopulations of coconut, one originating in the Indian Ocean, the other in the Pacific Ocean. However, admixture, the transfer of genetic material, evidently occurred between the 2 populations. Given that coconuts are ideally suited for inter-island groupation dispersal, obviously some natural distribution did take place. However, this should not be extrapolated to claims that one ocean's subgenera possibly could have floated to interbreed with the other. However, the locations of the admixture events are limited to Madagascar and coastal East Africa, and exclude the Seychelles. This pattern coincides with the known trade routes of Austronesian sailors. Additionally, a genetically distinct subpopulation of coconut on the Pacific coast of Latin America has undergone a genetic bottleneck resulting from a founder effect. However, its ancestral population is the Pacific coconut. This, together with the use of the South American sweet potato, suggests that Austronesian peoples may have sailed as far east as the Americas. Distribution: the coconut has spread across much of the tropics, probably aided in many cases by seafaring people. Coconut fruit in the wild are light buoyant and highly water-resistant. It is claimed that they evolved to disperse significant distances via marine currents. However, it can also be argued that the placement of the vulnerable eye of the nut and the site of the quiet cushion are better positioned to ensure that the water-filled nut doesn't fracture when dropping on rocky ground, rather than for flotation. Specimens have been collected from the sea as far north as Norway. In the Hawaiian Islands, the coconut is regarded as a Polynesian introduction, first brought to the islands by early Polynesian voyages from the homelands in Oceania. They have been found in the Caribbean and the Atlantic coasts of Africa and South America for less than 500 years, but evidence of the presence on the Pacific coast of South America antedates Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas. They are now almost ubiquitous between 26 degrees north and 26 degrees south, except for the interiors of Africa and South America. Natural habitat: the coconut palm thrives on sandy soils and is highly tolerant of salinity. It prefers areas with abundant sunlight and regular rainfall, which makes colonizing shorelines of the tropics relatively straightforward. Coconuts also need high humidity for optimum growth, which is why they are rarely seen in areas with low humidity. However, they can be found in humid areas with low annual precipitation, such as in Karachi, Pakistan, which receives only about 250 millimeters of rainfall per year, but is consistently warm and humid. If they had evolved in India, then you would expect that the extensive trading that existed between the Mediterranean cultures and India, Pakistan, Indus and Ganges Valley civilizations would have ensured that the plant was well known to the Egyptians, Romans and Greeks from a very early stage, but this appears not to be so until the possible time of Alexander the Great. Coconut palms require warm conditions for successful growth, and are intolerant of cold weather. Some seasonal variation is tolerated, with good growth where mean summer temperatures are between 28 and 37 degrees Celsius, and survival as long as winter temperatures are above 4 to 12 degrees Celsius. They will survive brief drops to 0 degrees Celsius. Severe frost is usually fatal, although they have been known to recover from temperatures of -4 degrees Celsius. They may grow but not fruit properly in areas with insufficient warmth, such as Bermuda. The conditions required for coconut trees to grow without any care are mean daily temperature above 12 to 13 degrees Celsius every day of the year, mean annual rainfall above 1,000 millimeters. no or very little overhead canopy, since even small trees require direct sun. The main limiting factor for most locations which satisfy the rainfall and temperature requirements is canopy growth, except those locations near coastlines, where the sandy soil and salt spray limit the growth of most other trees. Diseases. Coconuts are susceptible to the phytoplasma disease lethal yellowing. One recently selected cultivar, the Maypan, has been bred for resistance to this disease. Pests. The coconut palm is damaged by the larvae of many Lepidoptera species which feed on it, including Batrachidae spp, B. Arecaceae, B. Atriliqua, B. EJavanainen, and B. nuciferae. Brontospora longischema feeds on young leaves, and damages both seedlings and mature coconut palms. In 2007, the Philippines imposed a quarantine in Metro Manila and 26 provinces to stop the spread of the pest and protect the $800 million Philippine coconut industry. The fruit may also be damaged by Arecaceae coconut mites. This mite infests coconut plantations and is devastating. It can destroy up to 90% of coconut production. The immature seeds are infested and desapped by larvae staying in the portion covered by the perianth of the immature seed. The seeds then drop off, or survive deformed. Spraying with wettable sulfur 0.4% or with neem-based pesticides can give some relief, but is cumbersome and labor-intensive. In Kerala, the main coconut pests are the coconut mite, the rhinoceros beetle, the red palm weevil, and the coconut leaf caterpillar. Research into countermeasures to these pests has as of 2009 yielded no results. Researchers from the Kerala Agricultural University and the Central Plantation Crop Research Institute, Kasaragod, continue to work on countermeasures. The Krishi Vigyan Kendra, Pekanur under Kerala Agricultural University has developed an innovative extension approach called the Compact Area Group Approach to combat coconut mites.